The rain came down hard that Tuesday morning, the kind of rain that soaks you through in seconds. He ran down the sidewalk, his laptop bag pressed tight against his chest, trying to protect his work from getting ruined. His shoes splashed through puddles, and by the time he spotted the coffee shop on the corner, his shirt was already clinging to his back. The bell above the door chimed as he pushed inside, and the warm smell of fresh coffee hit him immediately. He took a breath, relieved to be out of the storm. The place was packed with people who'd had the same idea, all hiding from the weather with their phones and laptops spread across every available table. He shook the water from his hair and made his way toward the counter, weaving between chairs and trying not to bump into anyone. That's when it happened. One second he was walking, the next his shoulder caught someone turning away from the pickup station. Time seemed to slow down as he watched an iced coffee fly through the air, the plastic cup tumbling end over end. It landed with a splash across a leather sketchbook, brown liquid spreading across pages filled with detailed drawings. Oh no, I'm so sorry. The words tumbled out of his mouth as he stared at the mess he'd created. The woman who'd been holding the coffee stood frozen for a moment, looking down at her soaked sketchbook. She had dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, paint stains on her jeans, and for a terrible second, he thought she might cry or yell or both. Instead, she started laughing. Not a polite laugh either, but a real one that made her shoulders shake. She picked up the dripping sketchbook and held it away from her body, coffee still running off the edges. Well, she said, still laughing, I guess the universe really didn't want me working on these today. He grabbed a stack of napkins from the nearest table and started dabbing uselessly at the book. I am so sorry. Please let me replace your drink. And your book. And whatever else I ruined. Do you need a new laptop? New phone? New life? She waved him off, still smiling. Relax. Seriously, it's okay. These were just practice sketches anyway. I was actually getting frustrated with them before you launched your surprise attack. I really didn't mean to. I know. She set the ruined sketchbook down on a nearby table and grabbed some napkins of her own, wiping coffee off her hands. Tell you what. You can buy me another coffee and we'll call it even. Deal? He nodded quickly, grateful she wasn't angry. Deal, absolutely, whatever you want. They stood in line together, an awkward silence settling between them. He kept stealing glances at her, noticing the way she seemed completely unbothered by the whole situation. Most people would have been upset, but she just stood there relaxed. Like getting your work destroyed by a stranger was an everyday thing. I'm a graphic designer, he said suddenly, not sure why he felt the need to explain himself. I work from home mostly, so I come here sometimes just to, be around people. Not crash into them usually. She smiled at that. I'm an architecture student. Final year. That sketchbook was for my thesis project, but, like I said, those pages weren't working anyway. Maybe you did me a favor. Architecture. That's impressive. It's exhausting, she said, but there was warmth in her voice. I've been working on sustainable housing designs. Trying to figure out how to make eco-friendly buildings that don't look like weird green boxes, He didn't know, but he found himself wanting to. That actually sounds really cool. They reached the front of the line and he ordered her replacement coffee along with one for himself. While they waited, she told him more about her project, her hands moving as she talked, sketching invisible buildings in the air. Her whole face changed when she discussed her work. Her eyes got brighter. Her voice got stronger. He realized he was staring and tried to focus on what she was actually saying. Sorry, she said suddenly, laughing at herself. I talk too much when I get going about this stuff. My friends have learned to just nod and smile. No, it's interesting, really. I design logos and websites, nothing as important as houses people actually live in. Art is art, she said simply. It all matters. The barista called out their drinks and they moved to the pickup station. He expected her to take her coffee and leave, to go back to her life and forget about the clumsy guy who'd ruined her morning. But she didn't move toward the door. So, she said, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Do you have to rush off to work or can you sit for a minute? I feel like the universe is telling us something with this whole collision thing. His heart did a weird little jump in his chest. I've got time. They found a small table near the window, rain still streaming down the glass outside. She pulled out her phone to show him some of her architectural sketches, the ones that hadn't been destroyed. He showed her some of his design work. They talked about art and creativity and how hard it was to make a living doing what you loved. I was in a corporate job for 3 years, he admitted. Decent money, terrible hours, soul-crushing work. I finally quit 6 months ago to freelance full-time. How's that going? Scary, freeing, broke, he laughed. But I can't imagine going back. She nodded like she understood completely. My parents think I'm crazy for studying architecture. They wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, something practical. But I can't spend my life doing something that doesn't make me feel alive, you know? He did know. That was exactly how he'd felt in his old job, like he was slowly disappearing into a gray cubicle. They talked until their coffees were empty, and then kept talking anyway. He learned she loved old buildings and hated modern minimalism. She learned he was terrible at cooking but great at making playlists. They discovered they both had the same favorite movie, a random indie film neither of them had ever met anyone else who'd seen. This is weird, right? She said eventually, smiling. Like we literally just met because you assaulted my sketchbook with your shoulder. Technically, I assaulted you, and your sketchbook was collateral damage. Even worse. But she was grinning. He pulled out his phone, suddenly nervous. Can I get your number? You know, in case that coffee stain doesn't come out and you need to send me a bill. She raised an eyebrow. The sketchbook is definitely ruined. Then I definitely need your number. She laughed and took his phone, typing in her information. When she handed it back, he saw she'd saved herself under coffee victim. Perfect, he said. She stood up, gathering her bag and the sad remains of her sketchbook. I should get to class. Thanks for the coffee. And the conversation. And the chaos, anytime. Well, maybe not the chaos part. She walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Text me sometime. If you want, I will. And he meant it. He watched her disappear into the rain, then looked down at his phone, at her number sitting there like a promise of something he couldn't quite name yet. He didn't know it then, but that collision, that moment of coffee and laughter and unexpected connection, was about to change everything. He waited exactly 4 hours before texting her. Not because he was playing games, but because he genuinely didn't want to seem desperate. Still, his phone sat on his desk the entire time, and he caught himself glancing at it every few minutes while trying to work on a logo design that refused to come together. Finally, at 3 p.m, he typed out a message. Hey, it's the guy who destroyed your morning. Hope your class went better than your coffee situation. Her response came back faster than he expected. Barely survived. Professor loved my excuse, though. A stranger attacked my homework is apparently a new one. He smiled at his screen. And just like that, they started talking. What began as simple messages turned into paragraph-long conversations. They texted while he worked, while she sat through lectures, during lunch breaks, and late nights when sleep seemed less important than finding out more about each other. He learned she had a younger brother studying music, that she was terrified of birds but loved thunderstorms, that she drank her coffee with way too much sugar. She learned he'd been in a relationship that ended badly 6 months ago, that he played guitar but was too shy to play for anyone, that he had this weird talent for remembering song lyrics but couldn't remember where he put his keys. 3 days after the coffee shop incident, she texted him at 7 a.m. Same coffee shop, same time. I'm giving you a chance to redeem yourself by not spilling anything on me. He was there 15 minutes early, nervous in a way he hadn't felt in years. When she walked in, hair still damp from a shower, wearing an oversized sweater and a backpack covered in architecture pins, something in his chest tightened. They talked for 2 hours that morning, then 3 hours the following week. Then it became a regular thing, meeting at their coffee shop, sitting at the same table by the window, talking until one of them absolutely had to leave for something important. During their third meetup, she mentioned an exhibition at the City Museum. Some famous designer he'd never heard of but whose work apparently changed modern architecture forever. You should come with me, she said. Then quickly added, I mean, if you're interested in that kind of thing. No pressure. I'm interested, he said, and he wasn't entirely sure if he meant the exhibition or her. The museum visit happened on a Saturday afternoon. He met her at the entrance, and she was wearing a dress this time, something simple and blue, and he had to remind himself to act normal. They wandered through galleries filled with models of buildings and photographs of structures from around the world. She explained things to him, pointing out details he would have completely missed, the way certain angles created natural light, how some architects used space to make people feel small or powerful or peaceful. He found himself watching her more than the exhibits, The way her hands moved when she got excited about something. The little crease that appeared between her eyebrows when she was thinking hard. The soft laugh she made when she caught him staring. "Am I boring you?" she asked at one point. Not even a little bit. They ended up in a quiet gallery standing in front of a massive photograph of an old cathedral. The room was empty except for them, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor. She moved closer to look at something in the corner of the image, so close that her shoulder brushed against his arm. Then she leaned in, her mouth near his ear, and whispered, "Look at the way the light comes through that window. It's like the building is breathing." Her breath was warm against his skin. The words themselves were simple, just an observation about architecture. But the way she said them, the closeness of her, the quiet intimacy of the moment made his heart pound so hard he was sure she could hear it. He turned his head slightly, and she was right there, her face inches from his. Their eyes met, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with buildings or light or art. She pulled back first, clearing her throat, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "Sorry, I get too excited about this stuff." "Don't apologize," he managed to say, his voice rougher than usual. They left the museum an hour later, walking slowly through the parking lot like neither of them wanted the afternoon to end. She checked her phone and sighed. "I have so much work to do. My thesis is due in 3 months and I'm nowhere near done." "You'll finish it. You're brilliant." She looked at him with something like surprise. "You barely know me." "I know enough." That night, lying in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the gallery. The whisper. The closeness. The way time seemed to stop for just a second. He picked up his phone half a dozen times, wanting to text her, wanting to say something about what he was feeling, but every message he typed seemed wrong. Finally, he just sent, "Thanks for today. I had a really good time." Her response came 5 minutes later. "Me too, we should do it again sometime." They did. Again and again. Coffee shops turned into walks through the park. Museum visits turned into dinners at cheap restaurants where they split the bill and talked until the staff started stacking chairs around them. She showed him her favorite spots in the city, little hidden places she'd discovered while exploring for her architecture projects. He took her to a tiny record shop he'd been going to since college, where the owner knew his name and his taste in music. She bought an old vinyl of a band she'd never heard of just because the album cover was beautiful. "You're going to love this," he told her, even though he had no idea what it sounded like. She smiled. "Then I'm excited to find out." But underneath all the easy conversation and shared moments, there was something else growing. A tension neither of them acknowledged. Sometimes their hands would brush when they walked side by side. Sometimes their goodbye hugs lasted a little longer than necessary. Sometimes he'd catch her looking at him in a way that made his stomach flip. He knew he was falling for her, knew it in the way his day felt incomplete if they didn't talk, knew it in how he found himself thinking about her at random moments, wondering what she was doing, hoping she was thinking about him too. But he was also scared. His last relationship had ended because he'd chosen his dreams over compromise, and it had hurt in ways he was still recovering from. The idea of opening himself up again, of being vulnerable, of risking that kind of pain felt like standing at the edge of something high and dangerous. And she seemed scared too. She'd mentioned once, casually, that she didn't have time for distractions, that her education was everything, that she'd worked too hard to let anything derail her now. So they existed in this strange in-between space. More than friends, not quite together, close enough to feel the pull, careful enough to maintain distance. But distance is hard to maintain when every conversation makes you want more. When every goodbye feels harder than the last. When you start measuring your days by when you'll see them again. One night after another long dinner, they stood outside the restaurant in the cool evening air. She hugged him goodbye, and this time when she pulled back, her hand stayed on his arms. "This is becoming something, isn't it?" she said softly, not quite meeting his eyes. His heart hammered in his chest. "Yeah. I think it is. I don't know if I'm ready for something. I don't know if I am either." They stood there in the lamplight, the city moving around them, both aware they were at a crossroads without a clear path forward. "But I don't want to stop seeing you," she admitted. "I don't want that either." She finally looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw his own fear and hope reflected back. "So what do we do?" He didn't have an answer, not yet. But he knew, standing there with her, that whatever came next he wanted to face it rather than walk away. The text came on a Wednesday afternoon while he was in the middle of redesigning a website that was giving him a headache. Need a favor. Can you take photos of some architectural models for my thesis? I'll pay you in pizza and eternal gratitude. He typed back immediately. You had me at pizza. When? Tonight? My place? I know it's short notice. His heart did that thing again, that little jump it had been doing a lot lately whenever she was involved. Her place. That felt like a step forward, crossing some invisible line they'd been dancing around for weeks. I'll be there. Send me the address. He showed up at 6 with his camera and a nervous energy he couldn't quite shake. She lived in a small apartment on the 4th floor of an old building, the kind with creaky stairs and character that new places never quite captured. She answered the door in paint-stained jeans and an old college sweatshirt, hair pulled up in a messy bun, and she looked more beautiful than she had any right to. Welcome to the chaos, she said, stepping aside to let him in. The apartment was small but filled with her. Sketches covered every wall, books stacked in towers on the floor, architectural models in various states of completion scattered across her desk and dining table. Smelled like coffee and paper and something floral he couldn't quite place. Sorry about the mess. I've been living in thesis mode for the past 2 weeks. It's perfect, he said, and meant it. She showed him the models she needed photographed, intricate miniature buildings she'd constructed by hand. He could see the hours of work in every detail, the care she'd put into each tiny window and door and roofline. As he set up his camera and adjusted the lighting, she hovered nearby, explaining her vision for each design. This one is for low-income housing, she said, pointing to a model of a building with shared green spaces. The idea is to create community while keeping costs down. These gardens on the roof could provide fresh food and reduce energy costs. He snapped photos from different angles, asking questions, genuinely interested in what she was creating. She'd built these little worlds with her hands, and he could see how much they meant to her. An hour passed, then 2. The photography session turned into conversation, which turned into ordering pizza, which turned into them sitting on her worn couch with paper plates balanced on their knees, talking about everything and nothing. Can I ask you something? She said, setting her plate down on the coffee table. Anything. Why did your last relationship end? You mentioned it once, but you never really explained. He was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. But there was something about the way she looked at him, open and genuine, that made him want to be honest. I was working at this corporate design firm. Good money, terrible environment. I was miserable every single day. My girlfriend at the time, she liked the stability, the paycheck, the idea of a predictable future. He ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit. When I told her I wanted to quit and freelance, she didn't understand. She thought I was being selfish and immature. We fought about it for months, but you quit anyway. Yeah, I did. And she left. Said she couldn't be with someone who'd throw away security for a dream that might not work out. He looked at her. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being selfish. You weren't. Her voice was firm. You were being brave. There's a difference. Something in his chest loosened at her words. What about you? He asked. Why are you so scared of distractions? She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. My parents immigrated here with nothing. They worked terrible jobs so I could have opportunities they never had. My mom still works 2 shifts at the hospital. My dad still drives a taxi 12 hours a day. Her voice got quieter. They sacrificed everything for me. I can't waste that. I can't fail. You're not going to fail. You don't know that. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you're talented and passionate and brilliant. I know your thesis is going to be amazing because you don't know how to do anything halfway. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw something shift in her expression. Vulnerability. Fear. Something else he couldn't quite name. Thunder rumbled outside, and rain started pattering against the windows. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, more intimate. The space between them on the couch felt like both too much and not enough. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. His pulse quickened. Okay. She turned to face him fully, tucking one leg under her. I can't stop thinking about you. Like, constantly. When I'm working, when I'm trying to sleep. In the middle of class. You're just there in my head all the time. She laughed nervously. And it terrifies me because I don't have room for this right now. I don't have room for feelings or complications or any of it. He couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Could only stare at her as she continued. But here's the thing, she went on, her eyes locked on his. I don't think I can stop. I don't think I want to stop. Even though it scares me, even though the timing is terrible, even though I have 1,000 reasons why this is a bad idea. She took a shaky breath. I like you so much, and I needed you to know that. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and real and impossible to take back. Rain continued to fall outside, the only sound in the sudden silence. He leaned closer slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But she didn't. She stayed exactly where she was, her eyes moving from his eyes to his lips and back again. I can't stop thinking about you either, he said softly. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up. The last thing before I fall asleep. Every good thing that happens, I want to tell you about it. Every bad thing, I want to talk to you about it. You're everywhere for me too. She closed the remaining distance between them, her hand coming up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. This is crazy, right? We barely know each other. I know enough, he said, echoing his words from weeks ago, but meaning them even more now. She leaned in, and he met her halfway. Their lips touched, tentative at first, testing. Then she made this small sound in the back of her throat, and something broke open between them. The kiss deepened, weeks of tension and wanting finally finding release. His hand moved to her waist, pulling her closer. Her fingers tangled in his hair. They kissed like they were making up for lost time, like they'd been waiting their entire lives for this moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, she pressed her forehead against his. What are we doing? She whispered. I don't know, he admitted, but I don't want to stop. Me neither. She kissed him again, softer this time, sweeter. And outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the last of their hesitation and leaving only the truth of what they felt. They stayed on that couch for hours, talking and kissing and figuring out what this thing between them was becoming. There were no easy answers. Her thesis deadline still loomed. His freelance income was still unpredictable. The future was still uncertain, but for now, in her small apartment with rain on the windows and her hand in his, none of that seemed to matter as much as this moment. As choosing each other despite the fear, as taking the leap and trusting they'd figure out how to fly on the way down. 2 months passed like a dream he didn't want to wake up from. They fell into a rhythm that felt natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. Morning texts before she headed to class. Late-night phone calls when she was stressed about her thesis and needed to hear his voice. Weekends spent together, bouncing between his place and hers. Working side by side at coffee shops, stealing kisses between deadlines. She'd leave little sketches on his desk when she visited. Tiny drawings of buildings or random doodles with hearts in the corners. He'd surprise her with her favorite coffee when she was pulling all-nighters, sitting quietly in her apartment while she worked, just being there. It wasn't perfect. She got stressed easily, especially as her thesis deadline approached. He sometimes got too caught up in his work and forgot to text back for hours. But they figured it out. They talked things through. They learned each other's patterns and moods and needs. He was happy. Really, genuinely happy in a way he hadn't been in a long time. That's why it hit so hard when everything changed. It was a Tuesday evening. He was at her place, sprawled on her couch with his laptop, working on a logo design while she sat at her desk, deep in thesis mode. The comfortable silence between them was something he'd grown to love, the way they could just exist in the same space without needing to fill every moment with words. His phone buzzed. Then hers did. He ignored his, focused on getting the curve of a letter just right. But she picked hers up, and he heard her sharp intake of breath. Everything okay? He asked, not looking up from his screen. She didn't answer right away. When he glanced over, she was staring at her phone, her face pale. Hey. He closed his laptop and sat up. What's wrong? I got an email. Her voice was strange, flat. From Professor Chen. He forwarded me something. Okay. She finally looked at him, and he saw a mixture of excitement and fear in her eyes. There's an internship in Copenhagen. 6 months working with one of the best sustainable architecture firms in the world. They want to interview me. His stomach dropped, but he forced a smile. That's amazing. That's huge. It starts in 2 months. She set her phone down, her hands shaking slightly. If I get it, you'll get it. You don't know that. I know you. He stood up and went to her, kneeling beside her chair. This is exactly the kind of opportunity you deserve. You should absolutely go for it. She looked at him, searching his face for something. It's 6 months in another country. The weight of those words settled between them. 6 months. Halfway around the world. They'd barely been together for 2 months, and now she might be leaving. We'll figure it out, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. She nodded, but didn't say anything else. And he noticed she didn't tell him about the internship for the rest of that evening, just went back to her work like the conversation had never happened. A week passed, then another. She got the interview. She prepared for it, practicing answers to potential questions, updating her portfolio. And through all of it, he supported her, encouraged her, told her she was going to do great. But she hadn't officially told him she was seriously considering taking it if she got the offer, and that silence started to eat at him. It was late Friday night when everything came to a head. They were at his place, some movie playing on the TV that neither of them was really watching. She'd been quiet all evening, distracted, her mind clearly somewhere else. "When were you going to tell me?" he finally asked. She looked at him. "Tell you what?" "That you're taking the internship if you get it." "I didn't say I was taking it. You didn't say you weren't either." He tried to keep the frustration out of his voice and failed. "You got the email 2 weeks ago, and we've barely talked about what it means for us, because I don't know what it means." She pulled away from him, standing up from the couch. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. This is my career. This is everything I've worked for. I know that. Do you? Because the way you're looking at me right now, it feels like you're asking me to choose. I'm not asking you to choose anything. I just want to know what you're thinking. I want to be part of this decision. It's not your decision to be part of." Her voice rose, sharp with stress and fear. "This is my life, my future." The words hit him like a slap. "And what am I? Just some guy you've been hanging out with for a couple months? That's not fair." "No, you know what's not fair? You shutting me out. You acting like this thing between us doesn't matter when we both know it does." She crossed her arms, defensive. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. My parents, my professors, everyone expecting me to succeed. This internship could change my entire career path. And I'm not trying to stop you." He stood up too, facing her. "But you're not even talking to me about it. You're just making decisions in your head and shutting me out, and it feels like history repeating itself all over again." "What's that supposed to mean?" "My ex. She looked at me exactly like you're looking at me right now when I told her I was leaving my job, like I was asking her to sacrifice something instead of trying to build something together. That's not the same thing." "Isn't it? You're so focused on your own stuff that you can't see I'm trying to support you. I'm trying to be here for you, but you're already halfway out the door." Her eyes filled with tears. "You have no idea what it's like. You chose to quit your job and chase your dream. And that's great, but I don't have that luxury. I don't get to fail. I don't get to take risks and figure it out later. Everything I do has to matter because too many people are counting on me. I get that. I do. But you're not alone anymore. You have me. Or at least I thought you did. I can't deal with this right now." She grabbed her bag, shoving her phone and keys inside. "I need to go." "Don't." He reached for her arm gently. "Don't leave like this. Let's talk about it." "There's nothing to talk about." She pulled away, tears streaming down her face now. "I got the internship. They called me this morning. I'm leaving in 6 weeks. The words hung in the air like a bomb going off in slow motion. "You got it." His voice came out flat. "This morning, and you're just telling me now?" "Because I knew you'd react like this." "Like what? Like someone who cares about you? Like someone who wants to be part of your life?" "Like someone who wants to hold me back." That stopped him cold. "Is that really what you think? That I'd hold you back?" She didn't answer, just stood there crying, and the silence was worse than anything she could have said. "You should go," he said quietly, stepping back. "Don't do that." "Do what?" Shut down, give up. That's what you're doing right now. No, I'm giving you what you clearly want. Space, freedom, a chance to focus on your career without the complication of someone who actually gives a damn about you. She flinched like he'd hit her. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. His voice cracked. You made your choice. You made it this morning and you didn't even think to include me in it. She wiped her face, grabbed her jacket, and walked to the door. She paused there, hand on the doorknob, and looked back at him. I love you, she said, her voice breaking. I know I haven't said it before, but I do. I love you. And that's why this is so hard. Before he could respond, before he could process what she'd just said, she was gone. The door closing behind her with a soft click that sounded like an ending. He stood in his empty apartment, her words echoing in his head. She loved him, and she was leaving anyway. He sank back down onto the couch and put his head in his hands, and for the first time since he was a kid, he let himself cry. 3 days felt like 3 years. He didn't call. She didn't text. They existed in this terrible silence, both stubborn, both hurt, both waiting for the other to break first. He threw himself into work, taking on more projects than he could handle, anything to keep his mind occupied. But every time his phone buzzed, his heart jumped, hoping it was her. It never was. She posted a photo on her social media on day 2, just a picture of her thesis model, nearly complete. He stared at it for longer than he wanted to admit, zooming in like he might find some hidden message in the tiny architectural details. He typed out a comment 3 times and deleted it 3 times. On day 3, he broke. He showed up at her apartment at 8 in the evening with Thai food from her favorite place and a heart full of words he needed to say. He knocked on her door, suddenly terrified she wouldn't answer, or worse, that she would but wouldn't want to see him. The door opened. She stood there in an old t-shirt and pajama pants, her eyes red like she'd been crying. When she saw him, her face crumpled. I'm sorry, they both said at the same time. And despite everything, despite the hurt and the fight and the 3 days of silence, they both laughed. It was a wet, broken sound, but it was real. Can I come in? He asked. She stepped aside and he walked into her apartment, setting the food on the counter. They stood in her kitchen, an awkward distance between them that had never been there before. I brought your favorite, he said, gesturing to the takeout bags. Pad Thai with extra peanuts and those spring rolls you like. You remembered. I remember everything about you. Her eyes filled with tears again. I shouldn't have left like that. I shouldn't have said those things. I shouldn't have made you feel like you had to choose between me and your dreams. He took a step closer. That's not who I want to be. That's not what I want us to be. I don't think you're holding me back, she said quickly. I never should have said that. I was scared and overwhelmed, and I took it out on you. You've been nothing but supportive since the day we met. But I was also being unfair. This internship, it's huge. It's everything you've worked for. And I was so caught up in my own fear of losing you that I couldn't just be happy for you. They stood there, looking at each other across her small kitchen, both of them raw and honest in a way they hadn't been even during their confession on her couch months ago. I meant what I said, she whispered. Before I left, I love you. I've probably loved you since that day in the museum when I whispered in your ear about the light in that cathedral. Maybe even before that. His breath caught. I love you too. I've been wanting to say it for weeks, but I was scared. Scared of moving too fast, scared of scaring you away, scared of getting hurt again. He moved closer, close enough to touch her if he reached out. But I'm more scared of losing you without fighting for this. I don't want to lose you either. But I also can't not go. This opportunity, it's once in a lifetime. It could change everything for my career. I know. And you should go. You absolutely should go. 6 months is a long time. I know that too. She looked up at him, vulnerability written all over her face. What if we don't make it? What if the distance is too much? What if you meet someone else, or I get too busy, or we just drift apart like everyone says long-distance couples do? What if we do make it? He countered. What if we video call every day and send each other stupid memes and count down the days until you come back? What if 6 months apart makes us stronger instead of breaking us? You really think we can do this? I think we can try. I think you're worth trying for. He finally closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. I think what we have is worth fighting for, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. She squeezed his hands, tears rolling down her cheeks. I'm scared. Me too. But let's be scared together. She stepped into his arms and he held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, feeling the way she fit perfectly against him. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other, finding comfort in the closeness. They ate the Thai food sitting on her couch, talking about logistics and plans, video call schedules, time zone differences, how often they could afford to visit. It wasn't romantic, but it was real, and somehow that felt more important. The next 6 weeks passed too quickly. They spent every moment they could together, making memories to hold on to during the separation. He took her to all his favorite places in the city. She showed him her completed thesis, and he watched with pride as she presented it to her professors. They went back to their coffee shop, sitting at their usual table by the window, holding hands across the surface. This is where it all started, she said, smiling. You destroying my sketchbook. I prefer to think of it as fate intervening. Fate has a weird sense of humor. But good timing. She squeezed his hand. The best timing. The night before her flight, they didn't sleep much. They lay in her mostly packed apartment, surrounded by boxes and suitcases, talking about everything and nothing. Making promises, sharing fears, holding each other like they could somehow make the morning never come. But morning came anyway, the way it always does. He drove her to the airport, her hand in his the entire way. Neither of them saying much because there wasn't much left to say. Everything important had already been spoken. At the departure gate, reality hit them both. This was it. This was goodbye, at least for now. 6 months, she said, her voice shaking. That's 180 days. That's 4,320 hours. But who's counting? She laughed through her tears. Then suddenly she was sobbing, and he was holding her, and people were walking past them, but neither of them cared. I don't want to go, she cried into his chest. I know I have to, I know it's important, but I don't want to leave you. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, cupping her cheeks in his hands, wiping away tears with his thumbs. He leaned in close, his mouth near her ear, echoing that moment in the museum that had started everything. You could never lose me, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. You're part of me now. You're in here. He placed his hand over his heart. And that doesn't change with distance. That doesn't change with time. You're mine and I'm yours. And 180 days is nothing compared to forever. She kissed him then, hard and desperate and full of love and promise. People definitely stared. They definitely didn't care. When they finally pulled apart, she pressed her forehead to his. I love you so much it hurts. I love you too. Now go chase your dreams. Go be brilliant. Go change the world with your beautiful buildings. And you'll be here when I get back? I'll be right here. At this airport. Probably at this exact spot. Definitely at our coffee shop. She picked up her carry-on, started walking toward security, then stopped and turned back. Day 1 of 180. Day 1 of 180, he agreed. We've got this. She blew him a kiss and disappeared into the security line. He stood there long after she was gone, his heart aching but also strangely full. His phone buzzed hours later while he was driving home. A photo of a sunset over an ocean, caption reading, Copenhagen is beautiful, but not as beautiful as what I left behind. I already miss you. Day 1 down. On 79 to go. I love you. He pulled over and typed back, attaching a photo of their coffee shop. The coffee here tastes better when you're around. But I'll keep your seat warm. On 79 days until I can hold you again. I love you too. We're going to make it. And as he sat there in his car, looking at her message, at her promise, at this leap of faith they were both taking, he realized something important. Love wasn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It wasn't about being in the same place or having everything figured out. It was about choosing each other again and again, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. She'd whispered in his ear once that a building could breathe with the right light. Now he understood. They were like that too. They'd found their light in each other, and no amount of distance could take that away. On Haiti days, they could do this. They would do this. And when she came home, he'd be waiting.